The books or the movies? Which one's better? So on one hand, while I have to admit that I'm not a huge watcher of movies, because for me they're just a little too short for me to usually be able to get a good grasp of the characters, I actually do enjoy watching the movies of my favorite books. Like when the Harry Potter movies came out, I was all over it. When I heard that Vampire Diaries was going to become a TV series, not quite a movie, all over it though. Like, super excited about it. Who doesn't want to see their favorite characters come off the page and come to life in visual media? So then why is it that there's this argument over whether the book or the movie was better? The problem I have with this question in general is simply that books and movies are two different mediums. So in my mind, there was no way it was ever going to match up perfectly. And I'm going to have to leave TV shows out of this because you definitely get a lot more time to delve into things in a TV show. And that's going to be a whole other argument, so I'm going to have to do that in a different video if I do address it. But it's definitely hard to argue that a movie should be exactly the same as a book. Now, sometimes you do have novelizations of movies, and that's a lot easier to actually do because you can pretty much just take everything from the movie and then type it out. You've already got like the settings, the character looks, dialogue, and all that kind of thing. I remember as a kid, I read the novelization of the Hercules movie, and it was pretty word for word for the most part. But you really have a harder time taking a book and then turning it into a movie, because a movie typically is a lot more condensed time-wise. It can take someone hours to read a book, if not days, depending on how fast you are, that kind of thing. So it really shouldn't be any surprise that a movie's not going to cover everything. Now, sometimes you can have them be split into parts, like one of the Harry Potter movies did, and that can cover a little bit more ground. But as far as movie producers go, it's really not practical to them. That's a lot more money to spend on something just to make the fans happy. And as far as something like Harry Potter, they were going to get money anyway. Like, who are we kidding? Harry Potter is still huge. We got Harry Potter World. Like, nothing other than Disney, as far as I know, has really been able to recreate that. But I did find it interesting that out of all of the Harry Potter movies, I actually liked the third one best. And I find that interesting because the first two movies followed the books pretty well, especially as far as tone and dialogue and character and all that. The third movie took a lot more liberties, and I actually found it more interesting to watch. But I did notice a lot of the fans didn't like that. They didn't like that it strayed a little bit more from the books. But it's really restricting for someone who's filming a movie to have to stay exactly within the confines of the book. There's so much more you can do with visual media, things you can show that you can't really do in books. Likewise, there's things you can do in books that you can't really cover in movies. So let's take Ender's Game as a great example. In the book, we have a whole section about Ender's siblings going through and setting up this really intricate political movement done through basically the internet, and they end up making massive changes to the world that way. The movie did not even start to cover that, but the movie was so focused on Ender. Like, they decided that Ender was the only one they were concerned about. And as far as movie format goes, that was the right thing to do. It's really hard to show a lot of the things that Peter and his sister were doing, as far as like just setting things out there online and playing this little chess game with all of the politics there. That translating into a movie is really not practical. It would definitely slow down the pace a lot. You can get away with that in a book because you're definitely going to sit down and take a lot more time with the book. Usually people, when they watch movies, they get really bored when it starts slowing down. There's a lot of talking and no moving. So I find it really interesting that a lot of people hated the fact that Ender's Game left that particular part out. It would have made the movie drag unbearably, especially compared to all of the interesting things Ender was doing up in space. So yeah, no wonder they focused just on Ender. I think that was a completely good practical move of them. So usually when I'm watching a movie after I've read the book, I try not to take the book too much into account. As long as it's still interesting, then I'm okay with it. And I suppose that kind of ties back into my fan fiction video where it's just kind of fun to take liberties with things. And as far as movies go, they actually just have permission to do that. They have the right to do that and make money off of it. Maybe that's the part that makes people angry. But that being said, there's actually a really good example of one time it really irritated me that the movie copped out on it. So we're going to take Chuck Palahniuk for this one. We have Fight Club, which arguably, I think a lot of people thought the movie was better. I'm pretty sure the writer himself said he thought the movie was better. Like, the movie just took a fantastic twist with it and definitely played on different parts than the book did. And the book was definitely still good, but it was a little more head game, mind game kind of stuff than the movie was. But the movie definitely played with the visual aspect of these things a lot more. And of course, you had fantastic actors to back that up, so it turned out really well. But then you have Choke. So I really liked the book. I thought it was just another one of Palahniuk's like kind of edgy, bizarre, really almost disgusting sort of things that he did. But it ended up working out pretty well. I thought the story was entertaining. I had a lot of fun reading it. I thought the ending was pretty appropriate for Palahniuk. It definitely made sense to me. So then when the movie came out, I was excited to watch it. And I noticed that the movie followed the book very, very faithfully. Like, I'm pretty sure they pretty much just took the book and then just wrote the script almost entirely based on that. So why did this irritate me? Because they changed it in the last 2 minutes. Completely different ending. Why bother following the book that closely if you're just going to change the ending? It didn't make sense. They've been so faithful up until that point. When you try so much harder to be faithful to the source material and then you make a big change, especially at the very end where everything wraps up, it's a lot harder to justify it. So yes, there are absolutely exceptions to the rule, I think. And there are definitely times where it probably would have behooved the movie makers to follow the book a little more closely. One of those times was Vampire Academy. Now, I love Rochelle Mead's work. I really like the books. But the movie both tried too hard to follow the books and didn't try hard enough. The changes that they made were mostly turning the sort of dark, paranormal, supernatural thing into a comedy. And while there is some pretty funny stuff in the books, it wasn't the main thing. So when they're taking that sort of thing and then turning it into a comedy, then you're kind of saying, well, this very dark, romantic story, the fans will love it if it's slapstick humor. Didn't really work. A lot of people were pretty upset, which is probably why we don't have a second movie. So I guess the point is that while there are some reasons for the books to follow the movies and vice versa, it really should be taken as a different medium. You really can't go in there expecting the movie to recreate what the book was for you. Your imagination is going to give you very different things than what the visual medium is. I remember when Vampire Diaries got slated to be a TV pilot, people were upset that Alana didn't have blonde hair and that Bonnie was black instead of a ginger. Now, one thing that did kind of upset me is that Bonnie was now a Salem witch instead of a druid, but it turned out pretty well, so long term I didn't end up really complaining. But it was kind of offensive, I think, that people were more focused on the looks of the characters. They were more concerned with how they looked in their head than what the visual medium was going to be like. And eventually, people have decided that the TV series is so much better than the books. I don't always necessarily agree, but they're both pretty good. I definitely enjoy them. The point is, books and movies are two entirely different mediums. You can't expect them to mirror each other. It's not going to be the same. It's not going to be the same experience. You're going to have two totally different experiences reading and watching these things. It doesn't matter if the source material is the same. Someone's going to have to take liberties. And you really got to give the movie producers a little bit more leeway because they have to focus more on the visual medium as opposed to the imaginative medium. And that's something that writers actually have a sort of an advantage on, because they get to pick at your emotions a little bit better by going a little bit deeper into the psyches and the thought processes and things like that. Whereas a movie has to be so visually good, as well as the dialogue, and the actors have to be good. Like, everything has to come together from so many different people to make someone feel something. It takes so much more effort for a movie to be good than a book does, because there's so many more people behind it. There's so many more factors behind it. There's the actors, there's the producers, there's the writers, there's the special effects, there's the boom sound and all of that stuff. Like, there's so much work that goes into it. All I'm saying is that when you go to watch a movie of your favorite book, try not to hold any differences against the producers. They did what they had to do in order to make it fit into this small little time frame compared to this massive time frame that the book had. It's not going to be the same experience. It shouldn't be the same experience. Just take it for a whole different experience. Think of it kind of like watching a visual version of a fan fiction that just happens to have permission from the writer to use the source material as much as they want to. There's a reason why the tagline says, based off the novel from author. So, my opinion, pretty much, there is no really books versus movies. They're just two different things to enjoy. And sometimes one's better, sometimes the other is. And sometimes they're both great, and sometimes they're both awful. So at the end of the day, it's just going to really depend on the work that goes behind it and how it happens to come together and how it makes you feel by the time you're done with that experience.